This ambiguous figure is called a Necker cube, and it illustrates that your interpretation of what you see is the creation of your nervous system. You can override the default interpretation created by your brain by mindfully choosing how you look at it. So let's do a little thought experiment. Gaze at the cube for a few moments and notice how the blue side shifts between being the back and front face of the cube all on its own. Notice how your nervous system automatically generates these alternating interpretations of reality for you. Now you can use this ambiguous figure to experiment with a different way to interpret the stimulus. So look at these two diagrams of the Necker cube and regard the dashed lines as invisible. You'll find that it requires effort to override the neurological processes that want to shift back and forth between these perspectives. So your challenge is to utilize your cognitive faculties to intentionally choose the reality you experience. So start by interpreting the figure as a cube with a blue front face. When you have that, then intentionally change the way you perceive the figure so you interpret the blue square as the rear face of the cube. To make this task a little more interesting, here's a figure with several Necker cubes. Now, the number of cubes you see depends upon how you look at it. Sometimes you'll see 6, and other times you'll see 7. In the thought experiment with the single Necker cube, you experienced what it felt like when the image flipped. Now we'll concentrate on whether you passively observe it flip or you flip it. Specifically, you're going to experience what changing your interpretation feels like when it occurs passively, in contrast to when you produce the change actively. First, experience what the change in your interpretation feels like as I flip the image for you. Now it's your turn to change your interpretation of what you see intentionally. So here's a new stack of Necker cubes, and your challenge is to count the number of cubes in each subjective reality. If you are able to change your perception intentionally, you have the power to mindfully influence your subjective reality. As you'll soon discover, this capability is the key to escaping recurring patterns of unwanted outcome. The Necker cube is probably the simplest example of an ambiguous stimulus. There are two possible interpretations, and the one you choose gets to influence your reaction, and the other fades into oblivion. The real world is much more complex, with many more possible interpretations, and perhaps even more ambiguous than these Necker cubes. Here is another example of an ambiguous stimulus that can be interpreted either way. Do you see light angels on a dark background, or dark devils on a light background? Since you're in on the illusion, you're not taken in by it. You can understand that this is artwork created by a human, in this case by the brilliant hand and mind of M.C. Escher. In contrast to Escher's creative fiction, the events that happen in the natural world are real, not contrived illusions. However, like the ambiguous visual stimuli we've been working with, you can interpret the events that happen in different ways. In fact, different people often do. To respond to the things that happen, you'll have to select one interpretation as the valid one. And once you do, all the other possible interpretations fade into oblivion. And your interpretation becomes part of your subjective reality and determines how you react to the things that happen. So, if you're aware of a recurring pattern of bad outcome in your history, it's a safe bet that your interpretation of the things that happen is responsible. And your personal research is going to reveal what's causing this problematic interpretation. The process of discovery will be easier if you can approach this research with an open mind. So see if you can suspend all your preconceptions and beliefs, and at least for the duration of this research project, adopt Socrates' motto: "The only thing I know is that I know nothing."